Okay, so today we're gonna be talking about one of the later episodes in 21 Reasons Why. 20 Reasons, was it 13 Reasons Why? It's funny, it says 13 Reasons Why, but then there's like an entire season after. No spoilers. You know who dies. Spoiler alert, you know who else dies. But this is gonna be the episode where Monty de la Cruz's past and or background is illuminated on. And there's this one particular scene that just kind of really makes me question the reality of the series. Not the series as a whole. Nah, I'm just kidding. Yeah, the series as a whole. I don't know. I am a 13 Reasons Why fan, so let me clarify that. But I will also say that now thinking about this post is actually very funny to me, and I just wanted to point these out. One of the primary things that kind of catches me off guard, and there's a scene when you get the other side of what Monty Montgomery de la Cruz is, a flashback where they say who's the Latinx, and I believe they're referring to him. But A, he's white as hell. Obviously, we know that Latin is not a race, it's an ethnicity, and he can look white as hell. But it's funny because amongst all these other white people, unless you know him personally, how the do you know and pick it out who is the Latin person? Which is funny. When non-Latin people say Latinx, it always catches me off guard because they just say Latinx. I'm not one of those where I hate the term Latinx because obviously it's more so to accept non-binary people who are Latin from the global south. That's cool. I'm all down with that. I'm not one of those Latin comedians that's like, who agrees with Latinx? And like, that's their joke. But it's just funny to me that Latinx isn't what's funny. What's funny is this one scene which I had to go back and check because I thought I was making it up, and I am not. He says, who's the Latinx? Don't want to be that guy, but I'm all down for having Latin people on 13 Reasons Why. I thought Tony's character, the actor, is Puerto Rican. The actual guy. That's what's funny to me is he's supposed to be a Latin person, and I hate that his dad and his little sister look more Latin than he does. Now, I won't even get into the fact that he's one of those, again, and this has become a convoluted trope amongst the more recent productions like this, like Euphoria, about teenagers, where every time they have an opportunity or a chance to say something about how casual homophobia is, instead they go for the angle of DL man or a chaser that hates themselves and is secretly gay and has to be outwardly homophobic to prove it. Montgomery de la Cruz from this episode is no different, and it's not lost on me that that's its whole argument, and I feel like gay people argue that. I don't really feel like I have anything to contribute to that. Obviously, I feel as a creative, a filmmaker, someone who writes screenplays, whatever, it's a very lazy kind of targeting, and I think where you could help chasers, DL men, and whoever else is seeking help finding out who they are, it's productions like these that kind of just don't really help anybody, and they're very antiquated. Maybe this would have been revolutionary in like the 80s when being gay or homosexual was like less accepted and even taboo given the crisis and ignoring of, but to have it nowadays is just convoluted, which also just results in one of my favorite, and I say that very sarcastically, which I hate, lines from the father, in which he says, and I'm not kidding you. Now, it's alright, I share the same background as what this character is trying to be for the most part. So, the dad says, "You are f***ed," and I'm obviously taking the F word out of there because there's no way I could leave it in there. By my own judgment, of course, like morally, not literally. And once again, that's another thing about this that really kind of upsets me. How come we get Tony's dad is kind of like a paisa, you know, like straight immigrant, whatever, and his accent, or at least his mannerisms, aren't as stereotypical as Monty's. And even then, fucking Monty turned out white as hell. And I'm not saying that there's no problem towards Latin people that are white. In fact, I like that sometimes in the Mexican productions. That way I can show people in the United States that Mexicans that look white exist, the same as Mexicans that look black exist, and whatever, you know. Being Mexican doesn't just mean looking like me and having like one unilateral brown color. But I digress. How could I forget that? And also adding one kind of cliched storyline about gay people, that you had to sprinkle in the other cliche about gay people, which is gay bashing. Because in the show, he beats the ever-living out of his little twink boyfriend or whatever. You always gotta throw that in, I guess. It's sarcasm. It is Monty's secret little twink lover who is the one who says who's the Latinx. Also loving that, in case you had no idea he was gay, or the fact that he's checking out Monty, he has to be looking at a Elton John Greatest Hits vinyl and Talking Heads. Like, you need proof and evidence that this guy is alternative or at least effeminate to a degree, and there's your subtext. So nice, 13 Reasons Why. That's very cool. But I'm gonna get to the other part of this that I don't like, which would be the casting. This topic has already been touched upon by another good YouTuber. Tara Mooney has a very good video on nepotism in Hollywood, and I wouldn't doubt if this is maybe Selena Gomez feeling like she has to pay this guy back or to scratch his back or whatever. But I mean, I don't necessarily dislike him. I think he does a good job at what he's given. And also shout out Michigan, because I looked him up. I guess that's where he's from, kinda. So Midwest represent to that degree. Obviously, I had to check. I already knew that he wasn't Latin. What he is the fact that he was in one of Selena Gomez's videos, and if you don't know anything about 13 Reasons Why, she was involved in that production. This guy's just half white, half Filipino. Binoy, the Wikipedia, you can Google it, correct me if I'm wrong. So this guy showing up and the gay lover being like, who's the Latinx? One of the first things I found out was that the actor for Monty's dad is actually not too bad. In this article, talks about doing nice roles, and unfortunately that his characters always die. And it's very unfortunate, no spoilers for 13 Reasons, but at least they only kinda did that in 13 Reasons, which makes it all the more bittersweet. And I can only wonder if they had him improvise that accent or if they told him that he has to. But shout out to the toxic dad being the one with the thick accent, and the other one, even though they share almost the same background, being the one that talks calmly. We will have to debate Selena Gomez's Latinidad, and I think me digging up these articles is the perfect preface for that, because she was the executive producer. And I know that doesn't mean extreme involvement, but that's definitely where you put your name on something so that it can get money and funding, and you look at it. This will make a good opportunity to talk about both. I had to overcome the fact that it feels bad being judge and jury over someone's Latinidad, but also the Monty thing in 13 Reasons is like the same throughout a bunch of US productions, even Spy Kids technically. The only reason that I felt reassured going through with this was because there's already a plethora of voices telling me not to question it, that hey, we got Monty's sister, you got Monty's dad, you got Tony's dad and Tony himself. That's pretty good for Latinos, right? But we have this old American tradition of just passing people off, and I'm not really a fan of that. I'm not a fan of Will Smith doing African accents. I'm not a fan of British people having to do American accents. I'm not a fan of passing off a Filipino guy as a guy named Montgomery de la Cruz, and then there being a scene that says who's the Latinx, and all that signed off by somebody who's now going through her Latina renaissance. And we'll have to look. We're about to deep dive in that. In this video, I have 4 different sources that I'll talk about in this Selena Gomez deep dive that I did. And again, I'd be more than happy if anyone else did any additional digging and found out more. I'm totally opening up the Selena Gomez discourse. Alright, so let me clear up first things first, is so you know where I'm coming from, so you know there's no hidden agenda, so you know how I will interpret the next articles that I read based on this viewpoint. I know that it's not really my place to judge Selena Gomez's Latinidad, like I just said. However, for me, using my context clues, using my knowledge of all my relatives, both mixed and not, and using the knowledge of the people I've interacted with on behalf of my family that lives in Texas, it feels like Selena Gomez really waited until it was safe to declare her Latinidad, and then if you ask her what she's done so far, which I know can be an unfair question, but she's kind of like a celebrity. I won't say she's a mega celebrity, but she's definitely up there. It seems like this is just a grab. And like some of these pieces are like puff pieces to help support her and to support that. I don't know, you have to forgive me. There will be a plethora of voices that will just support her on it. I don't think that she is that. I think she literally waited until it was very safe to come out as Latin. No, but to embrace her heritage. And if we're going there, and I don't like birth lottery mixed people arguments, but I would definitely say that her being half Italian or whatever, being fairer skinned, probably might have had a hand in helping her. You know, you get a Latin last name, but paler skin, and yeah. I don't know if I can compare her to the sister of the guy in Modern Family. Okay, so this took me on an emotional journey and led me down a Selena Gomez rabbit hole. I know more about Selena Gomez than I would like to, and I've gone over her history and least of what I could find on the internet. There could be things I can't find. And believe me when I say I don't like to judge people's backgrounds like I'm the sole arbiter of what's good and what's not. But let's just say I have some findings, and it's all gonna tie back to 13 Reasons Why. Just let me explain. In the first article, a mezcla article about how Selena Gomez feels like she represents Latinos by Eclin Luzmila Caraballo. Throughout this piece, this was one of the first links I read, and I think if you search like Selena Gomez, Latinidad, or Latin, this will be one of the ones that comes up. And to me, this literally just feels like I already liked Selena Gomez. Time to affirm it. And like, I've done a little bit of digging. Maybe I'd have to do world-class digging, but I don't see any interviews of her doing it in Spanish for like Wizards of Waverly Place promos. All the promos she's done on guest spots on Latin media, it's just they dub her in English. And far be it for me to judge anybody's Spanish because mine has an accent. When my mom heard the subject matter of this video, she says, "Who are you to judge?" and she thinks it's mean. But you have to forgive me. Like, if you're gonna use Latinidad to help your career, unfortunately, at least for me, the way I've been brought up is you're gonna have to pay them a little. They want to see that you're Latin like them. The consumer base, well, obviously, as Selena Gomez represents, sometimes you just have to have a last name. But, you know, sometimes they really want to know that you can at least speak Spanish, understand them, and demostrar algo, you know? They want you to show that you're like them. And granted, I'll have to look into it more, that she said she's released music in Spanish, but like her first breakout hit was mostly English. And going through this first article, it is a lot. Okay, it's a lot. I now know her intimate life details from the basic interviews that she gives, and they all sound similar. That she grew up poor, used change to fill up the car, single parent household. It's the mom, and the mom's the one that's not Latin. The dad's the one that gives her the last name and does all the cultural stuff. So once you left him, it kind of is questionable if the culture was like influencing her from living with her mom on her own all the way up to going to LA and doing all that and eventually getting into Wizards of Waverly Place, all that. For credit though, the article does say that she released the Spanish language version of Without the Rain, A Year Without Rain. Needed me. Just Selena Gomez discography. Like, the mini research that I've had to do to get into this is funny because this is just the hugest tangent ever. We were originally talking about 13 Reasons Why. Now we're just knee deep in Selena Gomez lore. That being said, I get that it would be far too easy for a detractor to say, "Oh yeah, well what have you done, pleb, with your life?" And you wouldn't be wrong, but it's just, to me, it's almost the same. Mixed people kind of float to the top. It's not even saying that I have to be like a purist and only 100% Latin people, because I have a controversial opinion that I'll tackle in a later video, but I think Susie Crabgrass did a fine job doing Selena in the new series, and I don't think it was a cash grab like everybody felt cool saying that it was on Facebook. Down an even further rabbit hole, she's got four or five like Spanish songs, an entire extended musical play, but then the rest of her career is like pure English. Now again, I'll address the nuance of not being able to define where your career can go as Disney royalty early on, but I don't know. Far be it for me to judge anybody's Latinidad journey, but I think there's other people that had Latin in themselves and from the beginning had it more pronounced than Selena Gomez. In general, she makes an appearance on Taki Taki with Azuna and Cardi B. It's a DJ Snake single, for those that don't know. It feels more quote-unquote mainstream Latin more than anything, but it's not really Latin. It's just kind of like pan-Latin, like a hodgepodge of stuff, so that white people or other non-Latin people can just pick it up and say, this is Latin enough, and that's it. I think in America, the death of certain communities is just the pan-unity unity. And I'm not against pan-unity because I think it can help, especially when infighting seems very pointless. I think it's also the death of certain people because we fight and strive to show how independent groups are very different from each other. You know, African immigrants to the United States are different than Black Americans. Mexican immigrants are a lot different than Puerto Ricans, and so on and so forth. This bland, it's not bland, but it's just shapeless kind of like pan-Latin identity doesn't really help our cases, and doesn't, it kind of reinforces why non-Latin people don't really know the difference of our particular communities unless they live alongside them or integrated into them. I think this is a wider criticism of all that and the 13 Reasons Why. Okay, so me giving Selena some grace, I'll give her this. A lot of Latin people, myself included, go through an arc. Now, don't get me wrong, from the beginning, I kind of had to learn Spanish because of my grandma. I wasn't exactly using it all the time, but I definitely would use it if you conversated with me, and I used to hang around my family talking in Spanish so I could learn until they shush me. I would always just sit there and then I'd hear, ¿Tú qué haces? And then I'd have to turn, I'd look and I'd say, oh, quiero aprender español. And then they would say, no, vete a jugar, ándale. And then that's it. I'm not that harsh. I won't say that she's pretending. But do you get what I mean? There's leaning into your identity. Oh yeah, I'm Mexican. Like, if you're asked. Then there's like, you know me, I'm Mexican. And for me, it's just, maybe it's the fame. Maybe she had to ascend certain levels of fame. But like, if she was like really Latin, she would have been like hanging around the Latino sphere. And then, you know what I mean? I think like a lot of it kicked in late, which I won't judge her for it being late. The way I feel is this. Coming from that community, I've had to wear it on my skin forever. I don't think I would have gone through the not showing it and then showing it later. Like, no, like the Latin Renaissance, like I said, seemed to just happen late. It's like she has like a few songs in 2010, 2012, and then that's kind of it. Now, granted, I get it's what it's like to be self-conscious, but to represent a greater issue about the community is like people get mad at it. The same thing with Selena, and we see it over and over and over again. Like, the community just wants to be embraced. I don't think that they should be demonized. One thing I never really liked about the Selena movie is that in the movie you're not directly outright told, but you kind of feel bad for Selena because you want her to learn Spanish so that she doesn't mess up, because you see how the dad was, because he was kind of more Tejano than he was whatever. It didn't go over well, which I can understand, being ahead of your community and being considered like alt or whatever and like not acceptable. However, there's high stakes. If she doesn't learn Spanish or she sounds like a cornball on stage, then they're not going to embrace her. And in some ways, subtextually, it's almost like telling you that they're bad for it, but not necessarily, because they're just trying to tell you that Selena's struggling with it, but that she gets frustrated. And I'm not going to lie, in the movie you feel bad for her, but technically that's demonizing that aspect. And you know what? Neither her nor her dad can really get mad that those people just wanted what they wanted. Doesn't mean they're right, but it also doesn't mean that Selena and her dad are right to try to want to Americanize them so quickly. Like he had to relearn through living vicariously through Selena. You know, you have to give them a little bit and then you can do what you want. Like Selena had to play up the Spanish. You know, she had to do her thing in Spanish and she had to sing in Spanish just to get to the English parts. And that was going to be what was popping before she died. May she rest in peace. But again, we don't demonize people for wanting you to validate your Latinness because they just want that connection. Anybody can throw on a last name and anybody can say they have ancestry. But at the end of the day, they want to know. That ties back into 13 Reasons, because then would somebody who's like really Latin just lean in and say to their buddy, oh yeah, why don't you? And I know how Hollywood politics works, so maybe she might not have had the best influence over throwing that guy who was in her music video into that 13 Reasons, but not being able to pick where he goes. And I'll give her that. Maybe she couldn't decide where he goes, but we gotta stop passing people off, man. I don't know. That'll be the parting thought. Hopefully you see that I can at least explain it with nuance. We all see that people sometimes take a while to just fully connect with their Latinidad and then be like, yeah, that's me. Because it is hard measuring yourself against the community and trying to stack up to it or earn its approval. Because unfortunately, on this side of the border, all we want is really the approval of Mexico back home, or paisas, or people that straight out of Mexico that we deem more Mexicans than ourselves, that we we have to thereby impress. Okay, so the next article we have is this guy, Etienne. Alright, so this is the problem with Caliuchis and white Latinx. Why we need to have this conversation. So in this article, very quickly describes Caliuchis doing the same thing as Selena Gomez, where she starts off not really emphasizing the Latin part of herself, and for the next album she felt like she had to be more brown, and then she got all of a sudden quote unquote brown conscious, and then that changes her whole aesthetic, that changes her whole subject matter, changes her whole album covers. And honestly, that's unfortunately kind of similar to the argument I'm making. I forgot the article goes in on Sofia Vergara, because technically she did the same thing. If you ever see the footage of her in the 90s, which always ironically and weirdly enough gets shared on Facebook and saying like, this was Sofia Vergara in the 90s. eye emoji, and then something creepy about if you were back then in the 90s, or who knows. Anyway, basically it summarizes her doing blonde and fair skin in Colombia, but then when she comes here, dyes her hair brown and plays up the exoticness. Once again, it's kind of the same. So when I say same, you're gonna ask me, what do I mean? What I mean is, she wasn't with me shooting in the gym? No, but I think what it actually means is that it seems that both are kind of switching up, so to speak. That Sofia Vergara was blonde rubia and whatever back in Colombia. Now she comes here and it's, I know, Manny, go get my car keys. And with Selena Gomez, it was like crickets until like 2019, 2020. Besides doing whatever she did limitedly. And now it's more in Spanish. Now it's taki taki. Now it's that. And these all hint towards a bigger issue. It gets into the long deleted Caliuchis controversy, where she bullied somebody who pointed that out into deleting their tweets, got clapped back for it, and then said that she does more than certain. She said, if I quote, all you Twitter activists can swallow my nut. I do more and speak more on discrimination of POC and Afro-Latinidad than anyone. Eat me. I don't think that this is the knife in the back that people think that is, although I can definitely see why someone who's kind of vaguely brown but a little more white than she is brown, saying that she does more than for Afro-Latinidad than other plebs just because she's a celebrity. And even then, not really a celebrity that was like overly political, if I recall correctly. However, I might as well target Caliuchis fans and Selena stans. Go for 2-for-1 special. This article goes hard. I recommend it, but it helps me illustrate the point that I'm going for. This is in no way take away anything that Selena Gomez has ever done. In the article roundup, which I spent a lot of time talking about one and not the other, but we're attacking more the idea. See, this whole thing isn't really meant to target Selena Gomez or 13 Reasons, but it represents the system that out 13 Reasons and Selena, technically. And in all honesty, like I said earlier, some of these articles felt like easy passes, and Selena Gomez would talk about her Latin surname or her dad and this and that, and her grandparents come up in a few of these because they're documented, and you know, she's passionate about it. She helped put her name on some documentary about undocumented people, which kudos to her. However, in the magazine appearances and all that, and some of the later media on her, it's more her mom's side. Like, I have yet to, in this deep dive, to see her pose with her dad or her dad's side, and maybe if I looked for that I could find it, but I'm telling you about the surface, about the magazine covers, about what she's saying when she's talking to these people. It is more her mom, and again, that might be her thing. I actually agree if she were to hate this essay and say that it's none of my business, which it's not. And you know, I don't know what dad's side was like, and I don't know how it was like to have mom be the one to carry her on. But again, like I said, adopting the Latino moniker, or at least being in its orbit, is a tired existence. In the future, I will give you an essay about Latinidad and the chin checking of paisa versus cornball pocho, the spectrum that we have in the United States, because it is a cycle, but I don't think it's all bad. It just depends. And again, the magazine appearances and what appears as the first search result is often kind of what matters the most in this day and age. We can make media over and over. We can interview over and over. We can publish our thoughts ad nauseum on Twitter and on other things. So what floats to the top is going to be what people see. And that's honestly why this deep analysis of one episode and like one scene of one episode that's only a few minutes if not seconds, matters more than any other essay I could have done. Matters more than a Gentified essay. It matters more than a One Day at a Time essay. And it matters more than a George Lopez essay or any other essay. What matters not is those. But what matters isn't these, because anybody wanting to know about Latin people will go find these. So by then they're already pacified or not racist, and they're willing to look at that, to laugh, to grow, to build a connection. But I think 13 Reasons matters more because it's a lot wider, and for people that aren't so willing or feel like alienated or not up to the task of watching Latin people's stuff because they're not Latin themselves, and it can be different because like sometimes you don't laugh, cultural differences, this and that, whatever, yada yada. It matters more what they're being shown about us than what we show about ourselves in some instances. Now that doesn't mean stop trying, stop making Gentified, stop making One Days at a Times, whatever, but it matters because that little snippet, for somebody who's deep into 13 Reasons Why and is not Latin, is going to be the only thing they get of us. That's the only image that they get of us. That's the only 5 seconds of Latinidad on their screen. And what is it? Who's the Latinx? Monty beating up a twink and Chuarfa. So basically, why would I go down a rabbit hole to verify Selena Gomez's Latinidad? Well, it's part of the Latin thought process. Well, if her name's executive produced, then how do we end up with who's the Latinx, who's Monty? And there's just all kinds of conflicts of sellouts, of not being political when you don't really care, but then trying to be Latin when you need to sell shit, stuff like this on 13 Reasons that is in the public sphere forever, or at least for as long as Netflix keeps it up. And you gotta wonder, alright, so these are the Latin representations that are out. They're slipping out. And granted, I know we have all kinds of other Latin run things, but again, that's the thing. If you're gonna cash in on Latin identity, then you're gonna have to at least try to stick up for it. And I know it becomes very taxing on someone where it feels like they have to earn their keep in the community or acceptance, when in reality they just want to exist. But I feel because I've never really seen this criticism before, and it stands out to me that it's important to have these conversations. Like, there was always going to be various convos on my block, on Gentified, on One Day at a Time, and all these other cool Latin, made by Latin, FUBU, but for Latin productions. But nobody's really talking about the other ones. And in the later articles, it talks about what Selena Gomez is doing now, and that she's totally #representing Latinas on that new show with the old people. And that's cool. But again, and then, now that I was talking about it with others, this isn't even to go in. So you know what else kills me about who's the Latinx scene? As a Latin person, how I've lived through in the United States in both snobby communities like the party that Monty and Bryce go to in that show, to like real life from the barrio in the hood, nobody knows right away that you're Latin. Unfortunately, when you're not black, you're just ambiguous, you're just brown. And the first thought in people's head isn't who's the Latinx. Half the time people don't even know that I'm Latin, but you're just kind of brown. So I think more realistically they should have been, who's the brown guy? No, I'm just kidding, but in all honesty, you get what I'm trying to allude to. That in itself was cringe and kind of racist, and I get you might say that people don't talk like that, but let me just extend that people do talk like that, they just say it in a different way. So have your fancy screenwriters come up with it in a different way. I myself am a screenwriter, and I don't think I would write this little twink guy to say who's the Latinx to his buddy, and there's no context to having known that Monty would be Latin amongst the backdrop of white people who don't look too far off from him. He looks white. Who's the Latinx just kills me, because I've passed for anything, and let me tell you, my Latinidad isn't the first thing people ask about. People think I'm something else. But still, racial ambiguity, guys. Subtlety. Again, subtlety. No Elton John greatest hits. No who's the Latinx. Subtlety. Also, lastly, I think that this A show, a series, an episode, whatever, is defined by how you flesh out the bad guys, the villains or the anti-heroes, or the kind of not villains, but they need to help be resolved, so they're not heroes either. They're like plot devices, kind of. And I know there's some cool, fancy movie making word for that the armchair people will use. That, like I said, Monty's character just again seems poorly defined. His dad is the dad with the accent. Chuar, I know what you are. And it's not that pronounced, but still the guy with the slight accent is the homophobe. And you know what? I talked to it with people, and people who like the show try to defend it. They'll say machismo, and I think that's another thing too, where Latin people are their own downfall. Just like black people, when other black people are featured in movies, what we both do is fill in the gaps on our own. And sometimes the production doesn't need the gaps filled for it, it needs to be questioned. Why did that black character do that? Why did this Latin character do this? That's the unfortunate part of lack of representation, is that you're just more than happy to jump at Monty's dad, Monty's sister, Tony's dad, Tony's family, and then who's the Latinx, and everything else just flies over your head. So, lastly, I did not want this video to end on some milquetoast ending where I say, oh, the Latino spectrum is so dastardly, and we're just both two sides that are trying to make it, and everybody's right and everybody's wrong, and woe is us, and we live in America. It actually, like, I didn't want it to be that, okay? So all the points I made about Selena and 13 Reasons Why still stand, but the reason why I stammer, stutter, and repeat that I do not hate her, to me the hardest thing in between these two is that you don't want it to be that. However, you don't also want the video to be, I think Selena Gomez is stupid and she sucks and that's my video. So somewhere in between both of those is this video, and I honestly think that I can criticize her but also not have that angry, self-righteous vitriol that social media and all these other platforms let people have. I know that I can be wrong. I know that I can be misled or angry when it shouldn't be angry, and I think that's important for people to acknowledge. However, I would just hope that the journey you went on in this video spoke to you, or at least said something. So the only reason that you go crazy like I do and you start trying to verify Selena Gomez's Latinidad is unfortunately because you're looking for errors. You think, man, only a complete Americano whitewashed coconut cornball would just greenlight that and let that happen. But in doing all this research and in humanizing Selena Gomez, it becomes a lot harder to stick to that. Now, I'm not gonna lie, my urban background, my upbringing, my youth, and as someone who's never had their Latinidad questioned, someone who represents it every day, or at least when people know that I am what I am, is what it is, it suddenly makes it a lot harder. But I think what's really cathartic about this essay isn't just me dunking on Selena Gomez, but it's showing you what this thought process is like. And imagine that like this happens day to day. Like when people having beers with their buddies, kids talk about it at the cafeteria, just all kinds of people chatting about it online or in person and this and that. And this is kind of how that works. Granted, after I made this, Selena Gomez is not as bad as Caliuchis, but she had the opposite problem where she kind of wasn't talking about anything. In this Vogue article, she talks about that. She talks about not really knowing or caring, or she says she gets it from some source that isn't, she leaves it vague, and it's hard for her to speak up, and learning with that makes her more political now that she feels moved, or that she can use her star power / platform to do things. And that is also why maybe I see that I wouldn't get it. It just, to me, it feels like I'm a peasant lobbing mud rocks at Selena Gomez's ivory tower. And all I can say is that post video, there's no crucifying of her, there's no she's a cornball, fuck her, there's no outcome. And to me, honestly, as I've gotten older, now that I'm not super young like everybody else anymore, I've kind of lost my edge a little bit, but I think that's necessary. No longer is there cornball, not cornball, real one, lame one. You lose the binary because unfortunately you discover how complex life is. And hopefully this video will prevent, or at least get people to talk about the issue that made all of this possible, and not just dunk on Selena Gomez. But why you need Selena Gomez is you need somebody tangible so that you know what the issue looks like. I could stand here and talk to you about hypotheticals on a black screen, but that's not funny, nor cool, nor entertaining, nor attention grabbing, nor anything. So that is why you need a tangible issue. So thank you, 13 Reasons. Thank you, Selena Gomez. I am sorry to both of you that you're not quite what I expected, but that doesn't mean I won't enjoy it. So if I end this on a note that more videos will come. I thank you all for watching, because Jesus Christ, this is half an hour. I hope that my Selena Gomez deep dive was worth the effort. And if it wasn't, then please leave me hate comments down below. I thank you all for your time, and I wish you a good night, or day, or good evening, depending on whenever you see this. Deuces. Bye.